I'm Clara Parker.
And I'm Ashley Hamilton. And this is Celebrity Memoir Book Club, the podcast where girls put themselves front and center so that you'll listen to our goddamn podcast.
We're very girly, but we're also very punk.
Podcasts for girls.
And we married each other.
That's so true.
And we had a baby named Coco when we named it after Courtney Cox's baby.
Exactly.
And then we moved to Massachusetts. I'm giving away the ending. Spoiler alert. And then Ashley had an affair.
Sorry about it.
Ashley.
Yeah, Claire?
What's going on, my friend?
Well, we've got incredible merch for sale. For your summertime butts. Put them in a short pair of shorts.
Can I say something about us? That's a problem.
I guess.
I'll say it about me because I don't want to implicate you, but I know it's you too.
Okay.
We made mesh shorts for the summer that are actually perfect. They're based off a pair of mesh shorts that I borrowed from somebody in college in 2011, and they have since gone out of like nobody makes a Sophie style mesh short anymore that you probably would have worn for track or something in 2008. We picked the dimensions, we sent them in, we got them not handmade, but we like had them custom made so that we could wear the shorts that we've been looking for. But I feel really sleazy promoting it because I don't want it to seem like I'm promoting something just because I want you to buy my stuff. But I will say the sweatpants we put on market last winter.
Oh, they were perfect.
They were actually the softest sweatpants in the world. And these shorts are some of the best shorts. I've been wearing them for 7 straight. I put them in the hamper. I took them back out.
I wear them in the morning when I walk bug, and then I fold them and I put them on a side chair for not dirty yet clothes. And then I wear them the next morning when I walk bug, and then I put them back on the side chair. And then eventually I go, they have to go in the hamper. They're dirty enough. They're dirty enough for a wash. And then I
good shorts.
Wash them and wear them again.
They're such good shorts. And I'm not just saying this to make you buy them. I'm saying this because we did notice a hole in the market. Me and Ashley have this sick perversion where we like use our merch to make stuff we want to wear.
Yeah. So the shorts are perfect. The hats are so cute and they look so good with the shorts. Let me tell you what, summertime in the park, wearing cute little maroon shorts and then a maroon hat or a blue hat with a maroon logo. It's very chic. And our fanny pack, perfect for park things.
And Ashley.
Yes, Claire?
What's going on with you personally?
Okay. I have to admit something. I got sick.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Ashley got sick and kept going, it'll be over in 24 hours. And I was like, no, it won't be.
Yeah, but I admitted that it happened. And that's a first step because usually I don't. Usually I go, I feel fine. I'm just sweatier than usual. I'm sweaty and I can't keep my eyes open.
I kept calling her and going, have you made progress on the Jenny Slate book? And she'd go, well, I was asleep. And I'd go, but last time I called you, you were asleep. Wake up, Ashley.
I couldn't wake up. I literally slept for 10 hours 2 nights in a row with like 3-hour naps in the middle of the day. It was crazy. I've never been that sleepy in my life. The way that it hit me like a ton of bricks as soon as our show was over. The next day I thought that I was hungover. And then looking back on it, I'm like, I mean, I probably was, but I also think I became dead that day.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that you used to deny. You're like, I don't get hungover.
A girl can't change. Let's just hold everybody accountable for who they were when they were 33. You know when the woodpecker would like run off a cliff, or the woodpecker would float off a cliff, but the coyote would run off the cliff too, and then all of a sudden he would notice that he was standing over nothing, and then he would just drop and clank to the ground. That's how I felt. I felt like I was just running, and then like the live show finished, and then I was just like off a cliff, and all of a sudden I was like, not really standing on anything, and then I was splat.
Well, I'm excited that you're back, and you feel better?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, I do. How do you feel?
I feel like I was really holding down the fort while you were sick. While Ashley was sick, I read 100 pages of Jenny Slate's book, Little Weirds. And then I called her and said, don't start.
And I said, well, you're in luck.
I have.
You're in luck. I've been asleep. And then I watched 10 episodes of Love Island and then I went back to sleep. When would I have time to read?
Those are hour-long episodes. I was only awake for 10 hours. I had no time. I started Jenny Slate's book. I gave it about 100 pages. I have to say, it was tough for me. Mm-hmm. I have since found out that some people really love it and they found it very tender. One person wrote that it reminded them of a religious text. I said, well, then you've never read the Quran. which came straight from the word of God.
Okay, I feel like we've referenced the Quran a lot lately.
Well, I've read it twice because it's
relevant.
Well, within Islam, it's understood that it's like the most beautiful work of literature, and that's part of the evidence that it was written by God. So when I think of like
beautiful work,
I think Quran.
Yeah.
I've never read it, obviously, in its original language.
Someday, though.
So it's hard for me to get the full effect of the poetry. But to me, if you say most beautiful work of art, I go, well, God wrote the Quran. So that's got to be pretty good.
Yeah.
Anyway, Little Weirds, not for this podcast. Even if you loved that book, you understand there wasn't much to talk about. Not for me, which is sad because I love Jenny Slate. I love Obvious Child.
And I love what she's done with, being a comedian who dates hot people.
Yeah. I'll just say 2 or 3 sentences about it here because I feel people have been robbed from
the episode.
I think when I really tapped out was when she used the metaphor of my heart is a plum and then my heart is a ruby. And then she used the metaphor of my hair is necklaces twice. And I just went, okay, it's one thing to be like, my blood is tamarind, my heart is plum. It's one thing to say it once. But when we were like doubling back down on these, I was kind of like, she's run out of things to say. She was a chair and then she was dead and she was alive and then she was a ghost. And then, I don't know, she was a bunny kissing herself on a croissant. I don't know. But then there was also a chapter about how boring her dreams have become where she describes a bunch of boring dreams. And I said, this is too indulgent, actually. It's one thing to share your dreams to a friend. Yeah. It's the worst thing to share your dreams in a memoir. It's an unspeakable evil to be like, how boring are these dreams? And then give examples of boring dreams. Like that.
You can't do that.
I came up with this idea one time watching Scarlett Johansson get interviewed on a late night show where she was talking about how people walk. She's like, in Paris, they walk slower, but in New York, they walk faster. And I thought, wow, to be so beautiful that you could tell somebody that story and them go, that's so interesting. Say it on late night. Don't even try to think of a more interesting story. That's how I felt about this. I think that's why criticism is so important because it holds people to a higher standard and allows them to do maybe better work.
My favorite Scarlett Johansson story? Our friend who was on tour with her husband and they were driving through Boston and there was lights and then they drove under a bridge and she said...
Under a tunnel.
And she said, it's just like Paris. You guys, this week we are discussing Girl in a Band by the coolest girl who's ever been in a band, Kim Gordon. I read this book maybe 8 years ago.
It came out in 2015. It's now 2025. So I guess this is a decade old, which is shocking. I didn't think a decade could have happened.
It's so crazy.
I just can't believe anything was a decade ago at this point.
I know.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. We're all but newborns on this earth. Every day I open my eyes and I go, today's the first day. And I loved it when I first read it.
That's so interesting to me.
I think I, first of all, had not read very many other memoirs. I'd read this one. I think I read Carrie Brownstein's book. I was a real punk rock wannabe.
Yeah.
Which I feel checks out. And so I think that I read them all being like, exactly. You know what I mean? I wasn't reading them for a story. I was reading them to be like, yeah.
That's, yeah. Me too. If it had been me, it would have been me. So I get it.
I'm just not on the Lower East Side, and that's why I haven't become the bassist in a band.
Yeah. And what's funny is you did end up at one point on the Lower East Side. Would you say you're the bassist of this band? No, I'd say I'm the bassist, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I'm not the bassist. I think I'm the
I feel I'm No. I think you're the guitarist.
Okay. I just didn't want to put myself as the guitarist if I wasn't going to get to be the guitarist.
No, I feel like I'm the bassist. You're the guitarist.
I guess there's no one else in here.
Can I say I don't think there's a drummer in this band. I think we have no sense of timing. I think we're way off beat. I think
that's so true.
There's a real lack of rhythmic consistency to our whole lives.
But I offer something of a melody for people to sway to. Anyway, so Kim Gordon, she was in the band Sonic Youth with her for 27 years husband, Thurston Moore.
That's a crazy name.
Yeah, but why would he not be from a band called Sonic Youth?
No, I mean, he had to form that band because his name was Thurston Moore, and it was either that or write the new Walden Pond or whatever. I just feel with a name like Thurston Moore, pen to paper.
Can I say, I'm actually surprised it hasn't kind of sprung up as more of a name.
Thurston?
Mm-hmm.
There's something gurgly about it. Do you know what I mean? There's something happening there where you're we're missing a good hard consonant.
I guess I feel, though, that it's also both preppy and pretentious.
Mm-hmm.
in this way that I could see someone from the tri-state area, like a lot of people from the tri-state area in like 1999 naming their children Thurston.
I wonder if he perverted its natural flow and that it was meant to be taken on by like the Darien crowd, but unfortunately became associated with like punk rock and nobody wanted to like name their kid a punk rock name.
Yeah. That's possible. Wow, a lot of thoughts. A lot of ideas
get the
swirling
people from
around.
Gooseberry or whatever it's called, the baby naming website on here.
I want to talk to that girl. You know, the girl on TikTok who does
I follow 8 of them, so you're going to have to be more specific.
But there's one who's my favorite.
They're always like, you're looking for something fresh, classy, rhymes with Clarice, and sounds like it could have been Greek or French, but only 21 people had it last year. Have you thought about Adela Bidet? Oh, good name. They're doing good work.
I love that. I like the one who goes, the pattern of their names is...
Yeah. I have a baby named Water Bottle, a boy named Pollixon.
If you look at the names of their previous children, they're all former Cleveland Brown tight ends. I love her. Okay. So Kim Gordon.
Kim Gordon really gave me a ran for my money. I tell you, it's not often I come nose to nose with a pretentious freak and stand down and go, you win. Please, you win. But oh boy, some of these sentences were like oatmeal peppered. She said, oh, you know Julian Schnabel? He tried to meet me, but I found it humiliating. She said, yeah, he's at my house right now. I'm pretending I'm not there. What do you mean you know Julian Schnabel? Gross.
You know Larry Gagosian, the most famous art dealer in the world?
Ugh, I let him decorate my dorm room, but then I puked because he did such a hack job.
He kept trying to hang out with me. He was so annoying. I can't stand him, and he's such a hack, and everyone who hires him is a loser. He's also showing my next show.
Anyway, when Spike Jones was interesting, and back before Chloe Sevigny had her period, I thought I spotted talent. Gerhard Richter is the only person who really understands what I'm thinking. Unfortunately, we've stopped speaking. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm the only feminist in the world. Every other woman's a slut. Okay, I'm done. I am done.
Not Coco.
No. Coco's actually a really good musician. Unlike the Smashing Pumpkins, Lana Del Rey, the Spice Girls, Courtney Love.
Billy Corgan is a huge loser. He is not punk. He is alternative.
Which is like a really bad thing to be.
It's like hugely humiliating. And
You're
he's
new
annoying.
wave? No. I said no wave. You should have no waves. Your music should sound like noise, but you can't call it noise.
No wave ended.
Trick question. No wave actually can't have a title because the whole premise is that it can't fit into a genre. So if you think you're no wave, then you're nobody. Okay, we'll get into the book. Sorry. Can I level with you guys?
Yeah.
This book I really liked up until about page 95.
Which is about when she meets Thurston.
So here, let me give you some background. She met this boy Thurston. They started dating, and then they started Sonic Youth together. They got married. They were married for 27 years. They got divorced a few years before this book came out because he was having like
a massive affair.
And to say he was having an affair is almost to be kind to Kim Gordon. He left her for another woman, and that she begged and begged and begged for him to stop having sex with this other woman, and he said maybe, and then would go on tour, and this woman would meet him, and they would be out in public having sex. So, like, do you know what I mean? To even call it, like, he left her for this other woman. At time of publication, they were still together. That's what happened. So
him and the woman were still together.
Yeah. She's just referred to as the woman. So I cannot imagine a more destabilizing thing. Like, I really understand the struggle Kim Gordon has in looking at her life, feeling like the rug has been pulled out from under her. I feel like this book was written coming out of that. And so she is trying to figure out who she was if everything she knows is a lie. And I don't think necessarily everything was a lie.
No, me either.
27 years, you could have a really good marriage for 25 years and then it kind of peters out. And that's still a significant amount of time. But so she's trying to like look back at this part of her life and remove the Thurston from it. But he was her bandmate and her husband and the father of her child. And so she like kind of hits this weird wall where she doesn't want to give him too much credit for being around. It's like when you go into a restaurant and you go, I'm vegan and gluten-free. What do you have for me? And they're just like, we have like water.
Rice.
Yeah, we could get some plain rice. The way that she's picking at things from the sides and trying to cobble together this idea of who she is without one of the most significant parts of her life.
Especially because she like hasn't lived beyond it yet.
And like in those years, how could anybody live? Like if somebody were to ask me to write a story about the last 5 years of my life and I couldn't talk about you or Mac, I had to figure out who I was without you or my husband, I really would be like, my parents got a dog and that was cool. Like, I don't know. I don't have much left. So I understand, but it was like, what happened to this book where we went from being like this interesting story about a woman finding herself artistically to just like suddenly nothing but name dropping and like moments of meeting other people that you felt the way it lost a semblance of story. And I think it's because she's trying to write around who she actually was, which was this man's wife. I'm your co-host. That's a lot of who I am.
I think that because she's such a like punk feminist, she had a really hard time sitting in the identity of being this scorned woman. I think it feels so cliche.
And I think for a lot of her career, she was very resentful of the fact that she was like the girl in the band. She did not want to be seen as half of a power couple. She was very aware of not wanting to be seen in connection to her boyfriend. And I completely understand that. But like the absence of him in this story, you're like, this is crazy.
And there's a lot of stuff that she's pretty resentful of in her ideal of what a cool punk artist should be versus what the realities of living are.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's a really interesting example of how hard, I mean, we talk about like decentering men, that's the big phrase right now. I think she really comes from an era that we haven't gotten past yet of intellectually, she's reading books about feminism. I think if she was to write an article about it, she knows objectively about feminism and she identifies as a feminist. And yet the truth is she's quite codependent and
she's lived in response to the men in her life for her entire life.
And so right now we're reading this story about her life where you cut out the thing that she's responding to and you're kind of like, a lot is missing. Now we'll get into it. What are we at? Minute 28?
So the beginning is the end. She opens with a description of her separation from Thurston. They say when a marriage ends, the little things you never noticed before practically make your brain split open. She starts with their final show as Sonic Youth when her and Thurston have broken up.
They're in Brazil. They traveled there separately. The whole band's kind of like, well, now what do we do?
Mm-hmm. That week, it was as if he'd wound back time, erased our nearly 30 years together. Our life had turned back into my life for him. He was an adolescent, lost in fantasy again, and the rock star showboating he was doing on stage got under my skin.
She also begins talking about how when Sonic Youth first signed with Geffen Records, it was then that we learned that for high-end music labels, the music matters, but a lot comes down to how the girl looks. The girl anchors the stage, sucks in the male gaze, and depending on who she is, throws her own gaze back into the audience. After 30 years of playing in a band, it sort of sounds stupid to say I'm not a musician, but for most of my life, I've never seen myself as one, and I never formally trained as one. I sometimes think of myself as a lowercase rock star. She really thinks of herself as a visual and conceptual artist. She has this line that she gets from somebody's art forum review, a Greil Marcus art forum. People pay money to see others believe in themselves. And I actually, as a comedian, found that to be a very interesting.
Yeah. It's about how people love to watch someone on stage who is like wholly in themselves. And that's like the role she was playing for all these years.
Yeah, that to be a rock star, you have to be able to be very vulnerable in the moment and willing to like jump off a cliff. She talks a lot about how performing live is like jumping off a cliff and just assuming that you'll fly.
Mm-hmm.
And that most people are too scared to fully do it.
Yeah. And I think that it kind of gives a lot of explanation to books like hers and Carrie Brownstein's, who are two female artists who throughout their entire books really insist on their lack of ability.
I was thinking that I was like, I'm almost sick of reading about these female rock stars who are like, music, is that what you'd call this? And I'm like, what is going on?
Surely you must be good at it.
How is no woman in music good at music? It's the darndest thing. I'm tired of reading memoirs. I need a biography. I need someone to sit me down and be like, who's good, who's bad?
How do you feel about it, other author who isn't in that girl's brain?
And Kathleen Hanna, did she think of herself as a good musician?
I don't remember.
I feel like they're all like, I've never seen a guitar in my life. I just got up there and started getting my period, but in a very raucous way. And then randomly, Pitchfork called me the best band in America. That's crazy. I was still working on C chord.
I didn't know how to play music, but I was comfortable sleeping in a car. And that's how we got here.
Music? I've been making a zine live on stage. Am I right?
You're right.
Am I right?
You're right.
Okay. Anyway, so this is interesting. Listen up. She's born in Rochester. They moved to LA when she's 5 because her dad's a professor of sociology. And guess what he invented? The terms jocks, freaks, geeks.
He's the one who said kids have different groups.
Nobody had said that before. And he's the first person who went to a high school lunchroom and said...
Credit him with Mean Girls, man.
Credit him with freaks and geeks. Credit him with everything. Everything we know about high schoolers, which is that there's groups and you become part of one. He's the first person who noticed that.
Talk about noticing stuff. Good noticing. He was from Kansas. The mom was like weirdly disconnected.
Not weirdly. They all were. Let me tell you, it turns out. I know everyone's like, trad wife, trad wife, trad wife. A countertop is so much more fulfilling than a cubicle.
You got to read some of these memoirs. We've got a lot of moms who didn't want to be there, man.
Oh, God.
And I'll tell you what, it makes daughters who read zine on stage.
So she was raised by like intellectually curious people in LA, which was just a barren wasteland. They hadn't even built the highways yet. What was there to love?
And she goes, you know, it was cool knowing that art was happening somewhere, but I wasn't allowed to go party on the Sunset Strip because I didn't have a fake ID. And there was like a imposed curfew in Los Angeles where if you were under 18, you had to be inside by 10. And then also they lived, she says, in the boring area, not in the hills with the artists.
But like her parents would have friends who were videographers and stuff. So there was an awareness of art. Also, they thought of themselves as academic LA and not entertainment LA. And they really looked down on entertainment.
Yeah. At one point, they moved to Hawaii for a year and then Hong Kong for a year because their dad would go on sabbaticals, or he actually established the UCLA study abroad program in China. So they lived there for a while.
Growing up, she was bullied endlessly by her older brother, Keller. She remembers at one point, like, jumping off something, falling on her back, having the wind knocked out of her. I couldn't breathe to the point where I thought I was going to die. I felt so stupid and embarrassed. I didn't even tell my parents. I always hated making mistakes, hated getting into trouble, hated not being in control. She thinks a lot now about how she was really raised to believe by her brother that power is not letting anybody see you cry. But she's like, is that empowering somebody to take away their own sensitivities? That like she really was made to feel horrible if she ever showed emotion.
Yeah. So her brother would make fun of her a lot. And for a while, she was like, oh yeah, older brothers make fun of younger sisters. And as they grew up, she was like, okay, what's happening here actually isn't normal. And it turns out her brother was pretty severely mentally unstable.
But he was really charming. She's like, on the one hand, I looked up to him and I worshipped him because he could be so on, so witty, so verbal. He was like operating at this other level. But later, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And so sometimes she looks back at how he treated her as a child and wonders if like the things she took for granted as just having an older brother were unusual.
Yeah.
I always got the feeling my mom would have rather been doing something else, that she wanted more for herself, more recognition maybe as a creative person.
2 years before she died, she said in passing to my aunt, I should have never left California. So her mom was originally from Northern California, moved to Kansas. That's where she met the dad. They moved to Rochester and back to California, but she can't figure out what this means. Does it mean her mom regretted her entire life?
And her children, yeah. My mother really loved Coco, Kim's daughter. She was the first and only grandchild, but instead of holding her, she spent hours watching her. She's going to be okay because you really play and interact with her, my mom once said to me, as if to say this was something she had never done with me. Her mom was also very old school and worried about Kim coming off too sexy. Her father was quite distant, but loved her and supported her and played a lot of jazz and music. And to this day, she credits that environment of growing up with like just a lot of jazz LPs in the house of giving her her understanding of like abstract music art.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up with Keller, that was one of the more formative parts of her life. In many ways, he ran over me, erased me, made me feel invisible even to myself.
At one point, he tries to sexually assault her, maybe.
Yeah. It seems like it was just like a one-off, but she never wanted to tell on him because she knew how much he'd get in trouble. And she looks back at things like this and think like, I wonder if that was the beginnings of seeing his mental illness. She says whenever she complained to her parents because it went too far, they would just say, well, just hit him back. And it really taught her, nobody's looking out for you. Nobody cares. The best thing to do is to be invisible. Just try not to get in anybody's way. And she says, I think that's why I feel so expressive on stage. It feels like the only safe place in the world for me to get in touch with my emotions because I spent so much of my childhood bottling them up. So they moved back to LA after Shanghai. She's 14 years old. She has a hard time finding friends because she's just like a regular middle-class girl and somehow nobody else is that.
Yeah.
Can you believe nobody else in her neighborhood in LA is a regular middle-class girl?
It's so crazy how in a neighborhood where all the houses, where you say all the houses are kind of shoeboxes that look the same, no one actually has the same kind of upbringing as you. Every town has one. That's what we've learned reading memoirs. Every town has one, and that one writes a memoir.
Her brother goes to school to study Shakespeare, and he starts having problems. Like, he's unable to stay in school. He moves into a trailer on their front lawn. They're riffing all the time, listening to jazz music. He's really introducing her to a lot of great writers. He has her read Hamlet, Macbeth, Twelfth Night, Nietzsche, Sartre, Balzac. He's really exposing her to a lot. But at the same time, my brother was going downhill in very slow motion. He moved his trailer out to Malibu. Nobody saw how non-socialized and solitary he was becoming, how he was pushing away one old friend after the other.
At one point, he has a full-on psychotic break, but that was not yet. It's hard to reconcile her feelings about LA with like what was actually happening in LA. Do you know what I mean? Because I just think she has such a morose outlook on it all.
Something she talks about constantly was that she's like, well, my teenage years were happening to the backdrop of the Manson murders.
There was a sense of apocalyptic expanse, of sidewalks, of houses centipeding over mountains and going on forever, combined with a shrugging kind of anchorlessness. Growing up, I was always aware of LA's diffuseness, its lack of attachment to anything other than its own good reflection in the mirror. I mean, I feel like we've read a lot of other memoirs, or a few other memoirs of people who grew up in LA around this time who talk about this boom of creativity. Like, if you think about...
I mean, we're going to get through the people she just casually knew in high school, the people she was running into. There was a lot of creativity going on. But what she really felt was, I think, this sense of being overwhelmed by the burden of her brother. And then also because she was kind of unwatched. I think they were all unwatched. Nobody had a parent until 1995. But she was just like hitchhiking a lot, and I had friends who were teenagers who were kind of hippies. And it seems like some of them were victims of Manson. And I get how that would freak you out. But that really...
It really cemented in her. It's so interesting because I think she's around the same age as like Anthony Kiedis and Flea.
They don't seem to be aware that at any minute somebody could kill you. But she's like, in LA... somebody will come kill you right now.
It's definitely has to do with like male-female of it all. But I also find it so fascinating the way she's like, obviously a cloud of death hung over Los Angeles.
Like, when I think of LA, you think of the dead people.
High school was a dark period for me. I never felt like I fit in, and the other kids seemed alien to me because in fact they were, but I got through.
This was an interesting sentence to me.
I was like, oh, aliens.
Everybody's a freak but you. Maybe you're the freak.
I did know this much. I couldn't find out who I was until I'd left LA and my family. Until that day arrived, I was just waiting, suspended. So in high school, her boyfriend is Danny Elfman, which
From
is crazy.
Oingo Boingo. He also did
all of Tim Burton's soundtracks and The
Simpsons intro song. I mean, one of the more famous songs of all time.
She said he was a real bitch. He would just kind of like leave and then come back. They were very on again, off again for years. At one point, and this is, I'm sure, if Danny Elfman writes a memoir, it'll come up. I guess she had a door to the backyard in her bedroom, and he would just kind of show up. And one time they had broken up. He like moved to Africa or something. And then he came back, showed up at her door, and just came to her room. And she had another guy there because they'd been broken up and he was in a different continent.
And he forever said that that was the moment he became an asshole because he was so humiliated. Which really gets to something we were talking about on the Patreon about how men have such fragile psyches that the tiniest little thing that happens to them at the age of like 19 will destroy them for life in this way where it's like,
can I say it'll destroy everyone else in their wake for life?
Yeah.
They'll be fine, kind of. They'll just be like a fucking hurricane.
Yeah, they'll just be a terrible husband and father.
Yeah.
Her brother has his first full-blown psychotic episode on the day he graduates from Berkeley with actually a PhD in English and like Shakespearean English specifically, I think. He was in the grip of a Shakespeare-inspired delusion and he was arrested. And then his family spends the next couple of years trying to get him in and out of hospitals and mental facilities to get him the help he needs. And eventually they just had to give up their responsibility to him and he became a ward of the state. She says now he's like stable and lives in a nursing home and is medicated and she tries to visit him as much as she can. But she definitely takes a moment to be like, Ronald Reagan fucked us all over by closing down all the mental health hospitals.
Yeah.
And he really did. It's really crazy that like it's been 50 years now and nobody's been able to rectify it. That there's been no answer. For something that could happen to anybody of any race, class, creed, it is truly like...
It's just like a wiring.
The fact that we don't have a national way to help all families, because there's like no family that can't be hurt by this.
Yeah.
That Ronald Reagan.
I hate Ronald Reagan.
He made a real mess of things.
He did a really bad job. She knows a lot of musicians. She's bopping around. For this like wistful little moment of I've got to get out of California, she really is drawn back to California a lot. She lives with some friends in LA for a while. Her boyfriend lives in Westwood Village. She's, just bopping around with friends, looking for odd jobs to pay for school. I think she's going to Santa Monica College. And she ends up working for this guy who's framing pictures, Larry Gagosian.
Larry had rented an outdoor space, which he subleased to other vendors in order to create a sort of mini plaza. There he sold schlocky, mass-produced prints of works by contemporary artists, the kind that appeal to teenage girls or women in their 20s who think of themselves as dreamy romantics in cheap, ugly metal frames.
He was erratic and the last person on the planet I would have ever thought would become the world's most powerful art dealer.
So if you don't know, Gagosian Gallery is like probably the top gallery in the world. It has
Sarah Hoover.
Yeah, that's where she worked. Oh my God, former memoirist.
Because they were showing Tom Sachs. That's how she met him.
I find like every word in this paragraph to be fascinating. I'm very interested in the way that he had that kind of business acumen where he was like started off selling posters in an
alley.
Like he really was a businessman first whose vertical just happened to be imagery. You know what I mean? I'm also interested in the way that she is so condescending to, do you know what I mean? The way that she's like, that schlocky hack. And then the way that she also is able to take a swipe at idiot women. Like, he put up shit that women like. You know, when teenagers want to beat up Converse on a ballerina. Yeah, leave them alone. They're 14 years old. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like interested in all the directions of elitism in this.
There's a lot of elitism in this book. And the finger never comes back at herself.
No.
Even when she's doing like concerts for the Gap.
Not just concerts. An improv quartet in Berlin for the Gap.
Oh, cool. Well, now it's not corporate. And the thing is, there's nothing wrong with being corporate. I'm sorry. We can't just expect people to never have health insurance.
I guess I just don't understand why the Gap wants an improv quartet. Why don't they just get music somebody's already practiced and made sure was good?
I knew I wanted to be an artist. Nothing else mattered. So she says that her parents were pretty supportive of it because since her brother had such a mental breakdown, they were very like, as long as you're good on your own, you're good.
She starts making art. She goes to this local art school and she's like, it wasn't prestigious, but it was cheap. But there she meets some really important people to her life. Somebody said to her, your art is very personal, so it'll be popular. Personal is still something I equate with Sunday painters. I still carry around with me a battle between working conceptually, art based on an overriding idea, and my pure carnal sensory love of materials.
Oh. So then she transfers to a school in Toronto because she wants to get out of LA and she thinks it'll be cool. Someone from her high school goes there and she lasts a year there before she's like, oh my God, it's so cold.
The other thing is she was a dancer at this time. She had grown up dancing and she had this dream of studying this interdisciplinary conceptual art where she'd be dancing, she'd be painting, it'd be all one. And she's like, it turns out that wasn't the case. I was studying dance and then I painted alone in my room and it was cold. And she was like, I was living with freshmen.
She's like, I had nothing in common with freshmen.
She's like, they're 18 and I'm 21. What the fuck could we talk about?
I didn't like being in a roommate situation where I was obliged to contribute money to the collective food budget or take my turn going to the supermarket, especially if I wasn't planning on being there most of the time. So then for a group project, her and some friends decide to do a band and they perform once and she's like, okay, yeah, we've started a band and they never perform again. But she realizes that she kind of loves performing. So then she goes back to LA. Her parents are like, why can't you see something out? And she goes, because it's fucking cold there. But in LA, back at the Otis Art Institute in downtown LA, she meets a couple of people that really changed her life. One of them is John Knight, a conceptual artist with an architectural background.
And the other is Dan Graham. Dan was and still is a volatile, wild thinker and communicator, a self-educated social anthropologist who spent his teenage years poring through the works of Margaret Mead, Jean-Paul Sartre, Wilhelm Reich. Reading an essay Dan once wrote for Fusion magazine about Dean Martin, where he compared Dean Martin with his cigarettes and cocktail glass to Brecht and Godard, and called Martin's persona both a myth and a scaffold, made me realize anyone and anything could be made interesting.
Totally.
So now do you guys get who Dan was?
So she notices that Dan and his buddy Mike Kelly really are impressive artists. She's very inspired by their work, but they like music better. That's something that she really notes. She goes, okay, all of these great conceptual artists wish that they could be musicians.
And she says, artists often work while listening to music and think, why can't I make anything look as this music feels?
Totally.
Well, maybe that's why you didn't become an artist. Maybe that's why your Sonic Youth isn't a famous painting, because you didn't have the knack.
So she notices now that New York is, super hack. These days when I'm in New York, I wonder what's this place all about really? The answer is consumption and money making. Wall Street drives the whole country with the fashion industry as the icing. But when she lived there, it was actually really cool.
Oh my God, this is one of her go-to insults. She goes, a friend recently described the work of an artist we both know as corporate, and it wasn't a compliment. The Museum of Modern Art is like a giant midtown gift store. One of the biggest insults she doles out in this book a couple of times that she goes, ugh, he made art that looked like it could be sold in a gift shop at the MoMA. Which,
I don't know. There's like really cool stuff at the gift shop at the MoMA.
Okay, it's one thing to
I
be
bought
like,
my clock there.
She'll be like, that t-shirt looks like it could be sold at the gift shop of the MoMA. And that's like a big insult. But then I forgot that she also calls all of MoMA a giant gift shop. That's what we're working with. That's where she's at. The Museum of Modern Art, one of the great modern art museums in the world, some would say. Piece of shit gift shop. But if you like it, that's fine. You're just like a hack idiot who doesn't really know anything about art or punk or feminism.
We can't all live in Massachusetts.
My favorite thing about her is that she obviously hates New York right now. That's why she had to leave.
Yeah.
Because it sucked now. And listen, in many ways, I get what she's saying, but she's like, ugh, everything now is Starbucks or Pret a Manger. When I lived there was something called Chock full of Nuts, which was
just still a chain.
Just a different Pret a Manger who couldn't hack it. I don't know, man. To be like, the chain stores when I was a kid are a lot better than the chain stores when you were a kid.
Can I say? But still, like the artist I know now that I'm a kid, she comes to New York. She's obsessed with it. She's, kind of just couch surfing, trying to figure out how she can make a living here. And then the check for a car accident when she got hit by a car when she lived in LA comes through. And that's how she's able to get a lease in NYC. Tale as old as time.
It is very lucky that every artist, every musician, everybody I've ever known that moved to New York moved right at the exact time when New York was cool, and luckily got successful and famous right before New York became uncool.
I can't wait for our story.
I'm noticing New York's getting less and less cool. We better get successful quick. The time is a ticking.
So she does acknowledge that her time from here forward is skewed because it's hard for her to write about this like burgeoning love story, looking back on it now through the eyes of divorce.
I find it interesting. I think you can feel the absence of something critical.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, she moves to New York City. Everyone famous ever she knows, she lived with, they were friends. She noticed a lot of graffiti. It turns out it was the graffiti of Basquiat. I don't know if she lived with him, but she noticed.
Everybody noticed.
Good noticing. She hasn't even fully gotten a place to live in New York. At the time, Peter was going out with the conceptual artist Jenny Holzer, who later sublet me a corner of her loft. It's a lot of names. It's a lot of names that tell a very little story.
Her first job was in a bookstore, very Patti Smith core. Larry Gagosian gets her a job. She gets a job as an assistant for his office mate. She once again takes a swipe at him. I'm totally surprised by what Larry became, and just as surprised that he'd go around telling people we were involved.
Over the years, I gave him the hardest possible time about exploiting the art world and about his complete absence of credibility as an art dealer. I mean, I kind of like that she's coming for him because I have to say, he's the only man she comes for.
Yeah.
Even Thurston, she's like, it's only women from here on out. It's women and Larry Gagosian are people beneath her.
She doesn't even really come for Thurston. She just calls him a genius a lot. And then also is like, but he kind of sucks at the end.
So here's just a list of names from one page. David Sal, Cindy Sherman, Robert Longo, Richard Prince. Richard Prince was her friend from this art gallery. You may remember him as the one who tormented Emily Ratajkowski in her book by painting her Instagram.
Yeah, you
and
can
calling
find
her
the
like a
essay.
fat cow or something in German.
Really?
Remember that was one of the big gotchas was the
caption was mean?
Yeah, the caption was another language. It was mean.
Damn. Yeah. From her essay, Buying Myself Back.
Which was in the book that we covered. So listen to the podcast.
Totally.
I'm worried you're about to send them to thenewyorker.com or some shit.
No, I'm telling them the chapter of our podcast to listen to.
Again, oh my God, Barbara Kruger. So it's just a real, she's like, did you know these people? Because I did.
One night, Richard and I found ourselves at Mickey's with an up-and-coming artist, Jeff Koons. With the exception of Richard, pretty much no one liked Jeff. So she does come for Jeff Koons, and she also comes for, what's his name from the Smashing Pumpkins?
Yeah. She thinks he's hack. That's who she calls alternative. She goes, he's not punk rock, he's alternative.
Yeah.
And he takes himself way too seriously. I was like, not like you.
Billy Corrigan.
Not like you. You don't take yourself seriously at all. I will say, she's like, how come Jeff Koons never got sued for stealing from Duchamp?
Great question.
She meets I don't know how to say it, Gerhard Richter, who's a German painter, and his wife at the time, Isabella. She uses multiple of his pieces of work for covers. There's just like not a lot of story here. It's a lot of just like, who else did I meet that was famous?
So she, through her friend Dan, discovers No Wave. So she's starting to get involved in this like but this like other music scene.
So No Wave was and is more like, no, we're really destroying rock. It's sheer freedom and blazingness that made me think I can do that. It's basically anti-wave, which is why, strictly speaking, No Wave can't even properly be called a movement at all and shouldn't even have a name. It's also a direct response to New Wave,
which is poppy.
Which was, for example, New Wave would be Blondie, The Police, Talking Heads, which was seen by a lot of people as lame sellout.
So Dan Graham is like, you got to write something. He's like, you can't just like watch this scene. You got to be a part of it. You got to write something down. You got to make something. So she starts thinking about the way that so much of her upbringing and her dad's sociological studies had to do with men and men's behavior. And so she writes a piece for like a cool magazine at the time about the way men interact on stage.
Called Trash, Drugs, and Male Bonding, about the triangulation of male friendship.
And people were like, that's cool. That was cool what you wrote.
And then she forms a little girl band to perform this like conceptual art performance piece that Dan invented, where you're basically looking into a mirror describing the audience, and then you start describing yourself as the audience is looking at you. But the problem is
Dan hates how they do it.
Well, they forget to do it. They like write all this music, and the idea is they're going to play their songs and then do his piece in between each song, but they forget to do his piece, and he freaks out. And she goes, well, it was actually problematic of him to like deploy female bodies as tools for his art.
Totally.
I agree. She had that experience again of being like, I love making music. And she left being like, we're going to keep this up, right, gals? And the gals were like, we're out of town.
We're busy.
That was horrible.
But one of those girls introduces her to Thurston. And so meeting Thurston, she never really talks about the conception of Sonic Youth, but her and Thurston start working together, and the rest of the band sort of solidifies around them.
She also says he kind of refuses to be part of the art scene. His feelings matched up perfectly with the fatigue and intimidation I felt around the gallery scene, and about the fact that art is money was now the prevailing atmosphere.
Totally.
She's like, looking back, maybe it's just because he didn't know anything about art. And it wasn't that he was like too cool for it or skeptical. He just like didn't know.
There's a lot, I feel, because she's trying not to write too much about their story that she projects upon to him. There was something wild, but not too wild about Thurston. His guitar playing may have been untamed, but we came from similar middle-class academic backgrounds.
She also says meeting him, she was coming out of a shaky relationship with an older man, so she was feeling a bit vulnerable. And I am like, okay, I think we have to let go of the rebound excuse.
You were together for like 30 years.
The codependent woman, the narcissistic man, stale words lifted from therapy that I nonetheless think about a lot these days. It's a dynamic I have with men that began probably with Keller. Growing up, I needed to believe that he was bigger than life, a distorted genius, declaiming and wild and white.
I mean, to go from there was something wild but not too wild about Thurston to be like, I had this toxic relationship with my brother where I like needed to believe he was untamed.
She goes, today when I think back on the early days and months of Thurston's and my relationship, I wonder whether you can truly love or be loved back by somebody who hides who they are. I mean, I think if you're in that place, it's like a hard time to be writing this memoir, to be honest. If you're not sure if any of the last 30 years of your life were true, then I don't like... Yeah. You have to kind of decide one way or the other and then write from that perspective.
Yeah.
This is the most she speaks about Thurston again until the affair, which is, as we know, 25 years later.
Well, there are a couple little moments where she talks about how as a band, he spoke to her a bit condescendingly and other people would hear it and be like, that's kind of fucked up how he talks to you.
They would hang out at the Mud Club. I don't know. It doesn't really come through how they just started this band and then they just started playing. It's so funny to me as a comedian. It takes forever to get booked on a show. And I feel like musicians are just like, we started a band and our first practice was a show. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Well, I think because she's coming from a scene.
Yeah.
Where people are probably like, oh, you guys are just making guitar noise.
Well, it's funny because she's like, he wanted us to play at CBGB's next. And he thought just because he had been hanging out there every night saying hi to the owner, that would be enough for him to get us a slot.
It was.
I'm like, okay, well, that was a lot of tone and tude for something that turned out to be exactly right.
There were so many moments of the formation of Sonic Youth. It's hard to pinpoint one. But
so she just doesn't.
Yeah. So she just kind of moves on.
So he starts this festival called Noise Fest, which is in response to the death of the No Wave Fest, which is basically because some guy tries to make a master list of all the no wave bands, and he leaves a bunch of people out and it hurts their feelings. So then Thurston starts this like all-day concert called Noise Fest. Over a 9-day period, 3 to 5 bands performed nightly, one of which was Sonic Youth. So she records an EP in 1981, 5 songs. Sonic Youth was dissonant and wild, but first records succeed now and again because you don't quite know what you're doing, but you go ahead and do it anyway, which I think is good advice.
Yeah.
I feel like when you're starting anything out, there's this feeling in you to be a perfectionist and you're waiting and waiting for it to be you have to. I remember that like held me back from starting stand-up for like a year, was this idea that I was going to write like a perfect 5 minutes to take to an open mic. I remember somebody going, you have no idea if it's good or not until you try it, so you better just start trying it.
Okay, so this I feel like is a part that I cut out of my Substack because it was getting too windy. I wrote a Substack about like getting involved in communities and how I feel like people sit from afar and like wait. And I think that a really good example of that is people trying to perfect their first 5 minutes of stand-up before they show up, because so much of it is like getting ingratiated in the community also, and then perfecting your work as you go. And I feel
also there is just no way to, it's like perfecting a meal before someone takes a taste.
Yeah.
You have to taste it along the way or you don't know.
You don't know what's going on. And so I think that there is this thing where like, of course, you should kind of know what you're doing, but like you don't really have to know. You have to just like know what's up. And you don't know what's up until you show up. And the way that they like knew all of these bands and they knew every venue and they knew everything that was going on, and then they could just kind of like fly by the seat of their pants. I feel like that's how every successful punk rock music book we've read starts, is they're just like, I don't know, we just started banging our instruments against a wall and then we were headlining.
Yeah. When I first began playing on stage, I was pretty self-conscious. I was just trying to hold my own with the bass guitar, hoping the strings wouldn't snap, that the audience would have a good experience. I wasn't conscious of being a woman, and over the years, I can honestly say I almost never think of girliness unless I'm wearing high heels. And then I'm more likely to feel like a transvestite.
The need to be a woman out in front never entered my mind at all until we signed with Geffen. She talks about other girls and how
they all mostly suck.
Kathleen Hanna and Bikini Kill are awesome because they are like truly embodying girl power, but then it got co-opted by the Spice Girls, and she's really proud that her daughter never heard of them. And I am like, okay.
Your daughter didn't have one friend?
Also, I'm sorry, read a fucking book by one of the 4 Spice Girls that we've read a book from. They're actually kind of interesting. The rock star thing has always felt dishonest to me, stylized and gestural, even goofy. I've always felt uncomfortable giving people what they want or expected.
When Sonic Youth started out, I really made an effort to punk myself out, to lose any and all associations with my middle class, West LA appearance and femininity. And then somebody finally was like, you're always going to look middle class. So she's like, I've decided that actually being a true punk is being crazy underneath and benign on top.
I guess a true punk is whatever she decides to do.
That's exactly. Can I tell you the feeling I got when I took in this book as whole? When life is happening and it's coming at you fast from every angle and you're throwing spaghetti at all the walls and you're meeting all these people and you're trying all these things, you're just saying yes and taking steps and trying. And then I think she's like looking back and kind of shaping it into some overarching theory of what she was doing. But in reality, you're in the moment. Your opinions are changing. You're hearing other people's opinions. You're just trying to make anything work.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know, man. You were just waking up every day, putting on clothes, trying to see how far you could get today.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the lessons that I take away from these types of books, is that actually creating art is just deciding something and then trying it out loud. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, afterwards, there's like some genius ideal behind it. Like when she has everything's deeply inspired by a visual artist she once saw in Berlin. But like,
yeah,
actually, everything is just what she decided that day. And I think that there are so many people who then read a book like this and they're like, I don't know these artists. And the MoMA is a gift shop. So where can I find out?
Yeah.
And it's just like, actually trust your instincts and keep existing in the world around you with like your eyes open, and then try stuff.
100%. And I think it's so funny, actually, because she says in this book herself that she wishes she was more of a conceptual artist. So I think the overarching idea is so important to her. And that's not even necessarily some hard and fast truth that like great art has to be conceptual. Like that's just something she wishes she was. So now she's looking back and adding a concept. But you know what I mean?
Yeah. Back then, even now, I wonder, am I empowered? If you have to hide your hypersensitivity, are you really a strong woman? Sometimes another voice enters my head, shooting these thoughts aside. This one tells me that the only really good performance is one where you make yourself vulnerable while pushing beyond your familiar comfort zone. I mean, I feel like that's something she really struggles with, is like, is she strong or is she going with the flow? And I don't know.
So she talks about confusion as sex. She like goes through basically all of the intellectual underpinnings of all her songs. So Shaking Hell was I've been reading the great feminist writer, filmmaker Julia Kristeva's essays about the male gaze. Then she was talking about the Barbara Kruger, like, you are what you buy. I will say, if you're looking for book recs and art recs,
she has a lot.
Yeah, this would be a great syllabus.
So they're moving forward as a band. They've put out an EP and toured like hell on it. They opened for a couple bands. They really hit the road.
And she actually made a touring memoir. I don't know in what way it was published, if it was just in magazines or if it's actually a book you could buy. But
she was writing tour diaries for the Village Voice.
Yeah.
Which she also talks about how a lot of mainstream, bigger music papers weren't writing about Sonic Youth, but they were interested in her. So she was writing tour diaries. She would write album reviews sometimes. And that was a way that they got Sonic Youth's name out there, was because she had a byline, not because they were the story.
Some people were taking notice. Grail Marcus, a music critic, wrote about their cover of I Want to Be Your Dog on his art form column. He said that the pieces were made up of small and, to Grail's mind, meaningful gestures that propelled the culture forward.
Cool.
But isn't that funny to be like, the small gestures that are changing culture? I guess the peace sign.
Yeah, the peace sign really propelled the culture.
The millennial heart versus the Gen Z heart.
Oh yeah, small gestures. Propelling us forward, indeed.
I wouldn't describe Lydia Lunch as a friend, since friendship requires trust. She was always trying to seduce Thurston. She's like, we went to England. The women were mean and they all had outfits and they were all different than me. She later says American bands are better than English bands because they have to tour more.
Because America's bigger and there's more room to tour too. So then they get a big licensing advance. They're with Blast First via Rough Trade, and they get a licensing advance. And so she's able to quit her full-time day job. When Bad Moon hit, people frankly started to look at us differently, and the college radio stations began playing our songs. So people start to really look at them as, a contender on the scene.
In 1984, Thurston and I got married. Frankly, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to commit to a long-term relationship. When I moved to 84 Eldridge, Dan kept teasing me about what a hippie I was. Even though I wasn't, his words had haunted me. By marrying Thurston, I was committing to something permanent, instead of always attempting to balance art with music, music with art, one or the other, back and forth. For someone so young, Thurston was 5 years younger than her, and still is. Thurston was much more attracted to domesticity than I was. His faith made me believe our marriage could work.
So what do you think about that? I find it to be so fascinating the way she rewrites this in every step
she's
forward.
Kind of being like, I didn't even want to get married.
Yeah, and I also find it to be kind of reflective of the type of man who likes his woman to the side. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, I do think marriage for a woman and marriage for a man. Like, why wouldn't a man like to get married? He was probably cheating the whole time. Plus, they already lived together. Plus, like, what's not in it for him? Whereas when a man gets married, his life gets easier. When a woman gets married, her life gets harder.
And I really feel that he was probably cheating the whole time. I don't think this affair 25 years in was it. I think that it probably was a pattern that reached a breaking point when he met someone he wanted to be with instead. That's the breaking point, that he didn't want to be in the relationship anymore.
You're going to read Thurston's memoir, no, for the Patreon this week?
Yes, I'm going to try to get through it. I've heard it's actually really the kind we don't like, where it's mostly just about each individual show that they performed and not at all about his personal life. So I'll do a dip.
He has to mention that he got married.
I hope. He strikes me as the type of person who is very like, I need you to be locked down. Mm-hmm. Like, you'll be my wife.
It's hard to tell because we don't know anything about him from this book.
Yeah.
The way the band composed songs was pretty much always the same. Thurston or Lee would usually sing the poppy, more melodic things from riffs one of them wrote. I sang the weirder, more abstract things that came out of us all playing together and rearranging until everything gelled.
So there are two conflicting narratives here about the band, where it's that they were all pretty equal and it was all pretty democratic. And then there was also a world where Thurston spoke down to her quite a bit and she avoided conflict at all costs.
There's also like I'm sorry, but this idea that they're such a democratic band, I can't imagine it didn't feel weird to be helmed by a couple.
Yeah.
Who were the oldest members. They were like the foundational members.
Yeah.
Okay, so then there's just a ton of stories about all the famous people they met.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of what the rest of the book is until the affair?
Pretty much. So she talks a lot about her look, coming to terms with like how she wanted to dress and present herself on stage, getting comfortable with looking a little like more of a sexy rock star girl. I had no idea what image I projected on stage or off, but I was willing to let myself be unknown forever. Self-consciousness was the beginning of creative death for me. I felt at ease only when I recorded something I felt good about, or I was in the middle of a gig, with sound swirling from the stage that was so amazing, time stopped and I could feel the audience in the dark breathing as a single unit. They write schizophrenia. She talks a little bit about the way that her and Thurston had such a creative partnership that he could write lyrics that felt like she wrote them.
She says like they never really had to talk about anything. They just both understood and knew each other so well.
Mm-hmm. You know, she hates Lana Del Rey. She doesn't think she's a real feminist, which like true, but I don't think your reasons are right.
It just feels like why take even time in your memoir?
Yeah. Daydream Nation comes out, which is huge. The increased media attention and seeing more photos of myself and Sonic Youth as a band had me more self-conscious.
Do you want to look cool or do you want to look attractive? She decided she wanted to be both.
Oh.
They've come out with this album, Goo, and then they get to tour with Neil Young. It seems like they only met him once, but she's like, how crazy that I used to know people who knew him and now I know him.
Yeah, so one of her friends when she lived back in LA was his roadie who died. So Goo is their first album on a major label. They signed with Geffen.
Soon the criticism started. We had sold out. How could Sonic Youth sign with a label as big and corporate as Geffen? But they were unhappy with how the smaller labels were doing.
In the early 90s, I was slowly embracing a new idea that if you wore sexier clothes, you could sell dissonant music more easily. I started creating a look that for myself had a campy late 60s, early 70s vibe. So when she dresses sexy, like a sexy rock star, it's art. And when Courtney Love does it, it's skank.
She does come for Courtney Love a lot. Courtney Love did punch Kathleen Hanna in the head.
Yeah, no, she shouldn't have done that.
Can I tell you, if someone punched you in the head, I would call her a skank.
No, me too.
Like at one point, she's like, I could tell their kid didn't even like Courtney. And I'm like, okay, you could have left that out. You don't know how a baby feels. You barely know the baby.
She met that baby like once. I do feel that people come for Courtney Love a lot and sometimes for good reason. And sometimes I'm like, what the fuck is going on right now? And I do wish Courtney Love would have someone edit that damn book for her because I know it's incoherent and I need someone to iron it out a little bit. I need it. There's a story about her in the beginning of this book about how she like stopped playing in the middle of a show and like wouldn't start playing again until everyone in the crowd chanted Foo Fighters are gay. And I'm like, I need to know more about her. Every time I hear a story about Courtney Love, I'm like, this book is so boring now. Tell me more. And I wish she hadn't punched Kathleen Hanna in the head. But I want to know what was going on there.
Yeah, well, what was her side of it?
Maybe Kathleen Hanna looked at her funny.
Yeah, maybe Kathleen Hanna said, I'm going to punch you soon.
Maybe she did a preemptive strike.
Maybe Kathleen Hanna has nukes.
No, I really don't think she should have punched Kathleen Hanna in the head, but I think that Kim Gordon involves herself in the story because she's like, well, we were on stage at the time, so it's kind of my story too.
And because everyone wants to be near Keith Cobain.
Oh.
As it came out, I heard it was wrong. It's just, I talk so much.
It's so hard.
I can't get every sound right.
It's so hard.
This is what I wanted to tell you guys, but Ashley's like in Courtney Love defensive mode.
I'm not defending her. I'm curious about her.
When they were touring with Neil Young, they were never allowed to do a sound check. So a lot of times the guitar Thurston picked up was out of tune since Keith, a friend who became our first roadie, had no experience with our tunings and unconventional strings.
So what was he doing here?
That's a really good question.
Just get a roadie who knows how to tune a guitar.
Or show the roadie.
Teach him.
Anyway, what I wanted to get to was sometimes on stage, Thurston got so frustrated he smashed his guitar. I only bring this up because then 2 pages later, she's talking about how Neil asked them to do a benefit for the Bridge School, which is a school that Neil Young and his wife started to help children with communication and physical disabilities. And it was acoustic, and she never played acoustic before. So she goes, I brought a guitar that I could smash in case things went wrong. And in the middle, she couldn't hear anything. So she just started smashing her guitar and was like, fuck everybody. And then she's like, I felt bad because the kids were there.
And then Neil's son came up to me in his wheelchair and said, everyone has a bad day sometimes.
I guess I just like can't really fathom going to a middle school fundraiser being like, well, what would I be willing to break if all go like, do you know what I mean? Like there is something where she's like, Thurston is so crazy. He's always smashing his guitars. Anyway, I was in front of a bunch of kids with communication disabilities, just screaming, fuck everyone, because I didn't like the way it sounded.
And then the next chapter is also insane where she talks about writing a song for Karen Carpenter called Tunic. She talks about how upsetting she found Karen Carpenter's anorexia. She's like, Karen Carpenter was part of this like mainstream bullshit thing, but like her family should have loved her more.
Can I tell you? And then she talks about the song Cool Thing. I just saw the phrase, I suppose African Americans could watch Cool Thing and say, this is the way white people see us as objects. And I went, I actually don't need to hear you speak for Black people in this country.
Yeah.
I like just skipped it. I was like, I don't really care. I don't want to hear you be like, this is how I imagine Black people feel. And this is how I imagine they feel watching me represent them. And it's good. I nailed it.
So something really important to her is that she was like best friends with Kurt Cobain, even though they didn't know each other that well.
They met twice, but
like more than twice, but fewer than a lot of times. She talks about seeing Nirvana for the first time. They had really started to get some buzz. Hoboken, New Jersey.
My hometown. I was probably just blocks away.
So there was like no one at the Hoboken show, but the East Village show was really poppin'. Iggy Pop wasn't that impressed, but Thurston and Kim were like, no, that was really good. She felt that her and Kurt had like this unspoken bond, and Kurt had like no one that he felt comfortable around except for her.
I remember the conversation vividly. It's so telling in so many ways. The first thing is that Kurt had no one he felt comfortable asking for advice. The second was that, yes, Courtney was utterly self-absorbed. And finally, that Kurt probably did spend more time with Frances than Courtney did. This was about him being like, Courtney is worried that Frances likes me better than her. She's like, and yeah, it was probably true.
Maybe. So she talks about how they had to tour pretty endlessly because that was how you got your name out there.
So they have a new album called Dirty, and they want to shoot a video. And so they have this rando Spike Jonze come over. They're going to give him a shot.
So they have someone directing like the main part of the video. Then they have Spike Jonze direct like the skateboarding part of the video. Jason Lee is one of the skateboarders. And their director teaches Spike Jonze how to do like music video edits. And his career really started to take off from there.
Yeah, after their video. Their next video for Sugarcane had Chloe Sevigny. It's her film debut. It was shot by Sofia Coppola. At the time, that was Spike Jonze's girlfriend. Marc Jacobs, ever heard of him? He was designing for Perry Ellis. He had just invented grunge. He did all the clothing. Kind of everybody was just there.
So then she gets a letter from Courtney. So this is right after she's met Courtney for the first time. She gets a letter asking her to produce Hole's first album.
She's like, they sounded messy. It was 3 women and a man. The only person who was good, according to Kim, was the man.
Yeah, and she goes, obviously Courtney was pretty shrewd, and she knew that having my name attached would be like really good for press.
She goes, Courtney was the kind of person who spent a lot of time growing up, staring in the mirror, practicing her look for the camera.
She was always sweet to Don and me because we were going to take her somewhere new and better, she hoped. But she yelled and screamed at everybody in her band.
I love this line. Thurston wasn't attracted to Courtney, but in hindsight, I see he's drawn to that level of darkness. Oh, okay.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Courtney was having a secret affair with Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins. I thought, ew, even at the mention of Billy Corgan, whom nobody liked because he was such a crybaby. Also, remember when I made you go see Teenage Fan Club and you were like, why is that guitarist such a dork?
I remember just being surprised because teenage is such a young word. And then I got there and it was all men in their 60s.
Yeah.
And it was just different than what you would expect. I was like, oh, this is not a fan club made up of teenagers at all.
Mm-mm. It used to be, though.
Okay, it's hard to believe.
Many moons ago.
Hard to believe.
So she starts a clothing line called X Girl. It's obviously really cool. And then they end up selling it to like a group in Japan who has it alive still.
For X-Girl's first line, Spike Jonze and his then girlfriend, Sofia Coppola, had the idea to mount an X-Girl guerrilla-style fashion show during Fashion Week. A lot of the rest of this book was just sentences I underlined because I groaned so hard. So then, the next time they wanted to debut it, instead of a live presentation for our next season of clothes, Daisy and I decided to make a faux Godardian film filled with tongue-in-cheek Marxist references we could present to fashion magazine editors. Chloe Sevigny, Rita Ackerman, and Daisy's friend Pumpkin Wenzel played the main characters, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on. I just have to say, I looked up the clothes. Truly, it was just Urban Outfitters style graphic design t-shirts to be like faux Godardian film filled with tongue-in-cheek Marxist references that you just sold to Japan. It's just a t-shirt company. Someone sounds a little bit like the guy from Smashing Pumpkins in terms of how serious she takes herself.
So Courtney and Kurt get together. Kurt was headed down an even darker path, and after he hooked up with Courtney, it was only a matter of time before he completely self-destructed. So this is something I really want to rail against, and I guess I'm a real staunch Courtney defender all of a sudden.
Not all of a sudden. I've been watching it happen. I think if you go back to very early CMBC episodes, you were a Courtney hater. I think you were of the mind that Courtney was a crazy slut.
I was, and I think that's why I defend her so hard is because I fell for the propaganda. I was propagandized to believe Courtney was a crazy slut, and she is, but in a way that's like You can't make a person go crazy. Like you can't
to blame somebody who is currently the mother of that person's child and say she drove him to kill himself is actually one of the crueler, more insane things I've ever seen.
And I think a lot of people say it. Like it's a very common rhetoric.
Unless she hand in hand held the gun to his head, you cannot say somebody.
People believe if she did.
And if that's true, then yeah, crazy slut behavior. But anything short of that, you cannot make somebody kill themselves. You cannot blame somebody's girlfriend for an adult man killing himself.
And also, it's just
you
like...
know who killed him? You guys.
I guess it's crazy
Kurt
to me
lovers.
because to this day...
I know him as Keith, but you guys who knew him as Kurt.
To this day, she has many, many episodes as like a barely together kind of rambling oddball is the kind way I'll put it. And I think that to say that she's this like contrived, manipulative lunatic who drove him to the brink of psychosis, while now to this day, like everything she does is a contrived effort against Kurt, I'm like, well, obviously she's unwell. Do you know what I mean? Like she's dealing with her own shit. And so to hold her responsible for his shit, I feel like is quite unfair. And I think that obviously, you know, someone who's not doing well mentally coupled up with someone who's quite unstable mentally, like obviously that's going to go difficult. It'd be very different, I'm sure, if he met someone who was like stable and loving, but everything would be different if everything was different. Like that's always the case
and also,
for everything.
maybe not. You really can't save somebody.
You can't save somebody, but you can't predict what would have happened if one thing had changed.
Also, I'm sorry, Celebrity Skin is a fucking top song.
Yeah.
You can't deny it.
You really can't. It's funny how often I think about Kurt. One element of his self-destructiveness was choosing Courtney in order to alienate himself from everyone around him. That's so mean. Anyway, Kurt passes. She's very shocked at the news. Coco is born that same year, so it's like a really up and down year.
Having said that, being in two bands when you're a new mom is a lot of work.
So she starts a band called Free Kitten with some of her friends where they're doing something that's like unintelligible. She goes, when I hear it now, I go, that's so good. Who is that? Me? Cool. I can't even tell you today what the Free Kitten records sounded like. Our only goal was to make them and put them out without getting too self-conscious about what we were making. Well, I guess it worked.
By the late 1990s, the underground experimental music scene had mushroomed. Grunge was just another way of marketing big, boring rock music.
She was in a movie about Kurt Cobain. She did a cameo because Gus Van Sant, is that who it is?
She does say walking up the red carpet at Cannes Film Festival is like very cool. I believe her.
Gus Van Sant promised that he would make something good. And overall, it was a painless, positive experience that spoiled me for other film experiences.
So they have a studio on Murray Street downtown in Manhattan, and then it's 9/11, and she's like, that was crazy for us. Oh, this is when she was getting ready to go to Paris to perform with an improv quartet that I was part of at the party thrown by Gap.
Punk.
It's so funny how much disdain she has for like finance-based fashion. And she was like, I had just been at this incredible Marc Jacobs party with millions of gardenias to celebrate the launch of a perfume. And I was like, oh yes, art.
It is art.
She goes, it was really beautiful.
Conceptually, gardenias represent death. Thurston's self-assuredness and outward confidence helped convince me that we could carry this parenting thing off. So there's a lot of blame, I feel, on Thurston for the fact that they became like a traditional family. Marriage was his idea. Baby was his idea. But obviously a man can't do what a mom can do.
In the same way that she's like, we never talked about anything. We just agreed on things. She's like, we didn't really ever talk about what kind of parents we would be. Having a baby created a huge identity crisis inside of me. It didn't help that during press interviews, journalists always said, what's it like to be a rock and roll mom? I'm sure Thurston got the same questions, but at least on the surface, it didn't appear to bother him as much.
In the end, he was probably a better dad than he was a partner. As more and more he'd begun pulling away from me, wanting to do everything his way.
Looking back, I think it was probably because he didn't want to be with me anymore. Damn, that's like a tough time to have a kid.
I guess because she can't write any of the love into this book, it's so hard for me to believe he wasn't cheating the whole time. And so maybe he wasn't, but there's no evidence of it because there's no romance here. It's only them meeting and then falling apart at the seams.
So they moved to Northampton, Massachusetts, which she describes as kind of like Hudson, New York, just kind of like a little hippie enclave of New York City escapees who wanted more land. And it's not suburban, it's a different thing. She just keeps being like, it's a different thing than the suburbs. A lot of places they considered Carroll Gardens, Cobble Hill, and Brooklyn, but we couldn't afford it. Or she says it was more than we wanted to pay. And we didn't want to live any further out in the New York suburbs. I have a theory, having finished this book. I wonder if she thought by leaving New York she could get him to be a more present parent and partner. Ashley has the theory that they had kind of a don't ask, don't tell policy about cheating, but he wasn't supposed to actually like leave her for someone else. I wonder if at this point she was like, I'm tired of being up all night with the baby and then watching you gallivant home at 4 a.m. after having fucked someone. Let's get out of here. And then that way, if you're in New York and sleeping with someone, I don't have to see it. But also, like, I'll have you trapped up in Massachusetts.
Yeah, like when you're here, you're here. And when you're out there, you're out there. But like, I don't want to smell her. Shower before you come home.
Underlying the decision to move there was the hope that maybe Thurston, Coco, and I could have a more family-centered, more unified, less scattered.
So they're going back to New York for, recording and stuff like that. They tour whenever Coco has a break from school.
Maybe we'd moved in an attempt to get away, not from New York, but from an unspoken tension that had been growing in our marriage since Coco was born.
I call that girls.
The game Thurston and I seemed to be playing without us saying a single word was, who's the adult here? So he had a lot of things going on. She seemed less busy, but that didn't bother her. And she's like, and I noticed that he would come home from New York and feel like happier.
Until he comes home from New York and starts seeming more scattered and like he wants to get back to New York. So Coco's in a band. She's really talented. She grows up. She has a beautiful life. Sometimes she feels annoyed that her parents are kind of famous.
She goes, I didn't really think we were famous, but then I realized we were in Gilmore Girls and Gossip Girl. That's all the girls there are, except for girls.
Yeah. It's like 2 out of 3 girls.
Or Golden Girls.
Oh, yeah.
Ugh, what I would do for a Golden Girls reboot. They couldn't do it these days because you know what the Golden Girls reboot is? And just like that, they're the exact same age.
Yeah.
Let me tell you this. Let me say this. Should I be single at 65? So help me God. I hope I'm with a bunch of friends doing hijinks in Florida rather than being in New York City acting a fool like any of those ladies.
Rather than in New York City ogling a bread delivery man's package.
And hoping that my Richmond, Virginia boyfriend texts me back. There was a lot more dignity in the Golden Girls.
A lot more dignity.
And there was a lot more sexual exploration. And I felt they were much more empowered.
For Seema to get edged out of her relationship and then edged out of a job, my God. My God.
Sorry, guys. We talk about this on the Patreon, but it's really all coming to me right now. The reason the Golden Girls is great.
Capitalism. You can't retire these days.
No, but I feel that the Golden Girls were written with a sense of respect and self.
Yeah.
You know, they had lived a life and they came into themselves.
Mm-hmm. And they had shorter hair. My whole life I'd accommodated for other people's feelings, ironic given how often the press likes to remark on my strong-seeming persona. So she is feeling pretty underwater in her relationship with Thurston.
Our marriage combusted when I inadvertently discovered a bunch of texts between Thurston and the other woman.
So now she starts really shitting on Thurston.
This is a crazy... Can I read a crazy sentence?
Yeah.
She didn't want to tell Coco because not only is it horrible to find out that you're not the most adored person in your father's life, betrayal can also change the way you see men, and right as you're entering the world as a so-called adult too. I'm sorry, who said that he loved the mistress more than he loved the daughter?
Your father doesn't love us anymore. He loves some slut back in town. She starts really making fun of Thurston's stage presence and how contrived he is. He was a punkologist, the guy who idolized Richard Hell with his music, his poetry, and self-adoration.
So this woman shows up and she's like an art book publisher. And first she approaches Kim to do an art book. And she goes, I would never do a fucking coffee table book. And then Thurston sounds interested. And she goes, really? You're interested in an idea for a Yoko Ono book that turns into a kite? It seemed like a book meant for the MoMA gift store. I cannot believe the way that to her, the meanest thing you could say to somebody
is that it's meant for the MoMA gift store. So they start working on a book. She had just published a book with a photographer named James Hamilton. Ring any bells?
That's Ashley's dad.
That's my dad, if he was a photographer and not a tax accountant.
And if just a different dude.
And a different guy.
Turns out there's 2.
But she hates James Hamilton, and it comes up a couple times because James Hamilton knew about the affair.
Anyway, it happens as all affairs happen. He starts acting weird. She ignores it. Everyone goes, I think he's having an affair. And she goes, no. He just has this girl he works with in our apartment a lot. And he's suddenly happy and he won't have sex with me.
Some of her friends go, yeah, Thurston's energy is so dark. We can't be around you guys anymore. One of her friends goes, I noticed because of the cigarettes. He started smoking cigarettes like crazy, and it was the same type of cigarettes that she smoked.
And apparently the affair girl goes, doesn't it freak you out that he keeps the secret of smoking from you? What's that about?
That's crazy. That girl's nuts.
That is nuts.
So then she finds out about it. He promises that he won't see her anymore. He does keep seeing her. He promises he won't see her anymore. He keeps seeing her. They go to therapy. He keeps seeing her. It turns out he just wants to be with her. So
they have since gotten married. So
really?
In 2020, yeah.
Wow. Well, Wikipedia still says partner, and I wonder if she's paying them $3 every time they ask.
She's like, so we broke up. And then she has a whole thing about why music's dead.
Can I tell you something really funny from the Ashley Hamilton canon?
Yeah.
So she talks about how performance has changed. The other day, I was thinking about where music has gone, where it's been, how it's evolved. And she talks about watching stand-up comedy. She went to a comedy festival called the Oddball Comedy Festival. And it was like the first big tour with multiple comedians put on by like a major touring company. So Live Nation did it. I was the tour publicist. And she talks about how she saw Dave Chappelle. He headlined it, and this was his return to stand-up. So it was like a really big deal. And they were in Hartford, and I guess the audience was too loud and too annoying. And so she watched him just like sit on stage and smoke cigarettes for his contracted amount of time. He did that. He hung in there. He stayed even longer than his time, continuing to talk to the audience, whose behavior at that point had gotten even messier. And then he said goodnight and walked off stage. The next night in Pittsburgh, I heard he killed it. I believe he said he wanted an atomic bomb to fall on Hartford. And I had to wake up in the middle of the night and do damage control.
Because he didn't feel they were respectful enough of his set.
Yeah.
Well, he's the king. He's the king, and he has perfect opinions.
It's just so funny to be like, I watched him gracefully just deal with an unruly crowd. And I'm like, I think he wished death upon them violently, which is fine.
But like dealing with the crowd would be like controlling them with your energy and comedy.
Yeah. She starts another band called Body Head. I had no desire to do anything that sounded explicitly rock. I'd taken the rock musician thing as far as I could take it. It was more about creating what Bill and I wanted to hear. Modern music, noisy, dynamic, emotive, and free. Also,
now she's showing with Larry Gagosian. She's like, can you believe it? And I'm like, yep.
She also plays with the living members of Nirvana for Nirvana's induction to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They have a bunch of women come and play like as the lead singer. As for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame itself, Kurt would have hated being a part of that, but I also think he would have been happy having 4 women sing his songs. I mean, you can justify anything. You know what I mean? Like, to be like, this wasn't rock and roll, but the way I was doing it was. Like, this was against his legacy, but the way I was doing it was for his... Like, anything can be what you want it to be.
And I think everything can be sold at the MoMA gift shop at some point in time.
God willing. Do you think they'll pick up our shorts?
Ashley.
Yeah.
Would you like a worm teeny with Kim Gordon?
Yes. Yeah, I would. How fertile would you say this soil is?
2.5.
Okay.
I feel it's like distinctly unfertile almost. As I said, I think it's a great syllabus. I think she's very well read and obviously interesting. And
it's an interesting snapshot of I
think you get a lot of ideas of her influences and stuff. Chock full of nuts. How would you have remembered without her?
I wouldn't have.
But I mean, like, there's a huge void in this book. It's undeniable.
It's like a 6'4" sized void. Well, love you guys.
Love you. Bye.